Okay, so I'll start with playing a little video, and this is something from.
Are we supposed to be hearing this?
You don't hear it?
No, I just see a
No
bunch of lips
sound.
moving.
Sorry. I was hoping you would hear it.
I think there's a special Teams mode for video, isn't there?
I don't know. Anyways, let me just I'll just stop it if you can't see it. Anyways, so what this thing is, it essentially it goes on to say that so they're talking about cell phones, and well, landlines, and there was no text and all that, and then he's talking about scary stuff from the past, right? And then he talks about the fact that we're using this stuff that was made from. This is where he's wrong, though. He's dead animals, essentially dead plants. But anyways, and we put that in our cars to move forward. And they say, "Dad, like we don't believe you anymore. This is stupid, right?" So, anyways, so there's a link to get it if you want to be able to see it, or if you want to see it, you'll be able to have a look. Okay. It's really old. It's it's from 2017 from Fleet Karma, which has now been bought by someone else. I'm not too sure. Anyways, welcome to the January 27th meeting. So let's go to the agenda. And actually, before we do the agenda, okay. There's a lot of people who've been talking to me about what's what right now with everything that's been happening, particularly south of the border. And if you, I was listening to a podcast yesterday, I believe, and then I went looking for stuff. So it turns out that the conservative movement does have some people who know that climate change is a problem. Okay, so in Canada, there's Conservatives for Clean Growth. Lisa Raitt is actually part of that, one of the founders. But in the US, there's something called Conservative Citizens Climate Education. That's a conservative group trying to educate people about the fact that this climate change thing is real and we need to do something about it. Okay? So it's not because we've got a right-wing person heading the US that things won't continue happening. The other thing you need to look at is that from a global perspective, okay, so if you look at what's been happening in the US, this denial thing has been mostly a US phenomena, okay? So if you go to Europe or elsewhere, they don't question whether the science is correct or not. It's a disinformation campaign that was largely focused on the US. And actually, if you do look at surveys today, people are truly denying that climate change is a thing and created by humans and all that. They're actually in the single digits, okay? So there's very few. And this is US numbers, okay? The Republican Climate Caucus, there is such a thing. In the House of Representatives, it's got 80 members, okay? That's a lot of people. And they're looking at developing measures that are favorable to addressing climate change. Now, why did this not work here? There we go. Okay, so only 20% of the car market is in the US. Okay, only 20%, and the GHG is also about 20%. So most of the stuff is happening outside the US anyways. Clean coal didn't happen in his first term. Coal actually dropped 30 to 40% in the US. Consumption in the US dropped 30 to 40% in his first term, okay? It's economics that's driving the transition. Okay, it's not people wanting a better planet. It's economics. So and the rest of the world is moving very fast. Good news keeps pouring in. Just one little bit here. In 2023, there's a gentleman. His name is Michael Bernard. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. Anyways, he's based out of Toronto. Has a podcast on climate stuff, climate technology. Anyways, he predicted back then that Pakistan in 2025 would be using, would be getting about 0.5% of their electricity from solar. Okay? 0.5. Now, it turns out that in 2023 or 2024, I'm not sure the year, the consumption of electricity on Pakistan's grid went down by 9%. This is a very coal intensive grid. Demand went down by 9% because of solar. Exactly. So if you look at the numbers, about 10% of the electricity today is generated by solar. The grid in Pakistan is very unreliable. This is common in many other countries. India is the same thing. The grid is very unreliable. So what people are doing is they're deploying solar and they're making their own electricity and saying, too bad with the grid, right? So there's a lot of positive stuff happening, and the message here is, there we go. Keep calm and stay focused, okay? There's still a lot of work to do, and we need to move on. So anyway, so the agenda for today, we're going to start with the AGM. I'll show you the financials. We won't put that on a recording because we prefer not to widely distribute that. Then we'll have a vote for directors. We have a few directors to vote in. Then motion on audit. So nonprofits are supposed to do an audit annually unless there's a unanimous vote of members to forego the audit. In the past, we've always had a vote to forego the audit. Why? Because just about everything we have in the bank would disappear with the cost of an audit. Okay, so we'd prefer not to do it. More on that later. Then we'll brief update from BlueWave or about BlueWave. We'll talk about adapters because we are looking at potentially buying some adapters and having the ability to bore them, be a benefit of being a member of EVCO. Then we'll talk about the cost structure for DC fast charging. We get comments all the time that people are being gouged when they're paying, 40, 50, 60 cents a kilowatt hour, for electricity at DCFC. I'm going to show you why it's not that much gouging, okay? Then we'll go to the news and past and future events. We have some events actually planned for April that we want to talk about. Okay, so first other item on the agenda is a brief update with BlueWave AI. So what they've told me, they sent me an email asking me to talk about this at the next meeting, which is today. Turns out that if you have a Tesla and you're part of the pilot, you might get this warning you see here. Okay, third-party app, smartcar.com, is trying to find your location. Okay, if you think about it, the software is trying to figure out how to control charging based on location. So it does need location at some point. Right now, I don't think it's that relevant because there's so few vehicles being done, but location will be important because they want to be able to figure out where you are to determine whether your car should be able to charge at that particular time or not. Okay, so what Smart Car has been doing, so BlueWave AI is using Smart Car to talk to the vehicles or to the service that's supporting the vehicles. And Tesla's done some weird stuff with their APIs lately. So they've gone to the Fleet API, excuse me, and there's some issues that are popping up. Okay, the comment there, I see the icon all the time in that. In the car, is you see the little icon here? I'm pointing to the icon that shows this icon appears there. I see that in the red Tesla all the time. It's always on. Normally, that icon indicates that someone is tracking me. Okay, so if my wife wants to know where my car is, she could track me with the app and it shows up in the car. You see it in the car, okay? If you happen to notice it, it's not as if it dings and beeps or something. But anyways, so it tells you that someone's tracking you. In this case, because the API is being used, that thing is on all the time. Okay, so I've got one of the two Teslas that's part of the program because they support only one per household at this point. The other one doesn't have this icon. Okay, so it's clearly because of that. So they're working on it. If you see the warnings, I I would ignore them if I was you. That's what I'm doing.
Those issues that people are uncomfortable with the
Well, so one of the things that they want to be sure people understand
yeah,
is that they're not trying to track people.
yeah,
They need the data, and they don't keep data they don't need. Okay, so they're very cognizant of privacy issues and all that. Okay, so they want us to know that that's the case, and this is happening because of this problem with the third-party app. Okay, so they're working on it, and they should have a resolution fairly soon. Okay, here, this is a question for the audience. There's a number. Do you want to go back to the other one? No? Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, we at the board had talked about potentially buying some adapters that would be, you know, if you're an EVCO member, you'd be able to borrow these, right? So there's different types of adapters, and I'd like to have a sense as to whether you would want to borrow them or not, and by type essentially. So CHAdeMO adapters. There's now a CHAdeMO to CCS one adapter. So a Leaf would be able to use a CCS one. Yeah, that's pretty new. That didn't exist before. It's quite expensive though.
I can bet.
$1,500, I think, or somewhere around there. But that's available, and we could make that available for people if people wanted that. There's the V2L, so vehicle to load adapters that the Kias and the Hyundais use, but there's other vehicles too that will be using that with time, right? So right now the J1772 is the one that would be used by the existing cars because that's what they have in the car, right? But the Ioniq 5 and others, all the others eventually will go to NACS, so we'll probably want to have a NACS version whenever those are made available, right? I'm not aware of them being available at this point, but someone's got to be thinking that this is needed, right? So, okay.
I've seen a number of ads
For
specifically that.
NACS? With NACS?
V2L next, so there's a.
VTL NACS? Okay, I haven't
yeah,
seen it.
so
Okay,
there's a
cool.
Kickstarter thing,
Okay,
and who knows, if you got a Kickstarter and there's no engineer involved,
No.
like, don't bother.
yeah, yeah,
But they're talking about a V2L next that'll work on your Tesla,
okay.
so. one of my
I would not
questions is,
recommend using that thing. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's not UL certified or anything, and it may void your warranty of your car. I mean, there's no
Yeah.
reason in principle why in principle it's totally fine. It's just pulling from the battery's perspective, a very small amount of energy out of the DC pins. That's not the issue. The problem is you're using this sketchy no-name brand thing that's handling 400 volts.
Yeah.
And has no certification. So
So
I wouldn't use that thing.
yeah, this one here, the one we're talking about would be the AC one, right? So it wouldn't be high voltage. The other ones would. But the point is, we would, if we're buying these, we're not going to buy the uncertified cheapo brand, right? From Temu or something, right? We're going to buy something that actually is supportable. Okay. Other things that we could buy is a CCS one to NACS. That would be for current Tesla owners who'd like to use CCS charging.
that's very useful.
Yeah, I've never had one. I've never had one,
Okay.
and I've been driving a Tesla since 2013. So there are some cases where it could be useful.
Yes, I had a
But-
neighbor who was in Newfoundland, when we were in Newfoundland.
Newfoundland is one of those places. Yes. Yes.
They-
Yeah. Yeah.
They use the CCS to next.
Yeah. Yeah.
Adapter, so I have a question about that.
Yeah. So that would be something that we could get one of them and lend it to people, right? The other one is the NACS to CCS one. Okay, so this is for current CCS car to use a NACS charger. Okay.
Are any of these for a particular model?
Good question.
Like, cause they're gonna do like, kind of, plug-in building, like where you just plug in and walk away and it builds you automatically or anything?
Well, so that's a bit of another story. That has to do with protocols at the charger level, and there's
So they're not that there's any intelligence built into these, they're purely electrical adapters.
yeah. Although the V2L, there may be something specific to, because the ones that I've seen,
Yeah.
They're only for Hyundai and Kia, right? I don't know of any others that be for any
That
other.
should be-
Yeah, so
Right.
Hyundai sells.
They
those.
do sell them,
Yeah.
but the point is we could potentially buy some, and if you want to bore it, then you'd be able to bore it, right?
And Tesla
Yeah.
sells us CCS1 to NACS.
It does?
CCS.
They do, yeah, so we would buy a good one, not
Yeah, so-
necessarily a Tesla one, but a good one.
Yes, but the Tesla one's $345.
Something like that,
CCS to NACS.
Yeah.
And A2Z.
Is a bit less expensive.
$145.
Yeah, it's a bit less expensive, so we'd look at, trying to figure out which one is certified and is supportable and it will actually work, right? So here for the other one, the second one here, some manufacturers are providing it free of charge, right? I'm sure you've seen that. But this would be us having one. So is there anybody who think they would use
Well,
one?
so these would be demo units that we'd bring to like events and stuff to show people how they get used.
No,
And then they would lend them out once in a while to people that.
We
need
probably
them.
would want to do that, but we hadn't, it was more about lending them to people that are going on trips. So if you're going to Newfoundland, right, and you don't have this adapter.
So all of a
you-
sudden, July comes around and everybody wants the adapter, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, there's that.
So-
Yeah.
There's a blackout and everybody wants to do it.
Yeah,
I mean, D2L could be used for other stuff too, like if you're gonna blow up a bouncy castle or
Yeah.
something like that. But I kind of think that there would be a high demand for V2L at certain times. Whereas on the travel, like if you're just traveling with the Max to see, like for me, I don't have one of those because Hyundai isn't allowed to use superchargers yet,
Mhm,
but at some point they will, and I would think it'd make more sense to borrow it, because I wouldn't use it that much except when I'm traveling.
but you might be getting one for free though,
Maybe,
because you have an Ioniq 5, right? You
Yeah.
should, I believe you do get one for free.
well, I mean, I keep hearing yes, and sometimes,
Yeah.
in the US for sure, and Canada maybe, and.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We're gonna cover that in the news.
Yeah, so is there,
one of the concerns I have with EVCO buying them is, did you know that EVCO owns an oscilloscope?
you do?
Do we know where that oscilloscope
I have
is?
no blanking idea.
Yeah, so
It's probably
Stuff
in
disappeared.
Gerard Garage or
So-
something.
that'd be the one thing I'd be concerned about if we
Yeah.
buy, I mean, I think it's fine to buy some that are generally gonna be used for events that we wanna demonstrate things for, and yes, loan them out to people as long as they bring them back right away,
Yeah,
after their trip, whatever, but just, I don't, well, I mean, if we're talking about, a few hundreds of dollars, okay, if we're talking of thousands of dollars, then I'm concerned.
well, okay, so I personally, the Shadamo adapter,
Yeah, forget that.
even if you have it,
I
it's not
could-
gonna make the
I could
charging
use it for
really
my
fast.
soul, but I'm not gonna go on a long trip with my soul. so-
Yeah, the charging wouldn't be fast anyways, right? So it wouldn't help you
slow
that
it
much.
down.
You fast and you don't have the range, so this
Yeah.
area.
Yeah, but the other ones, there may be a case to do the other ones, okay? So anyways, if anybody thinks they would use them, let us know. And we'll, doesn't seem like, at least people in the room here,
Well,
don't think, I
and
didn't
maybe
look at the
also,
comments.
Have a registry of people who have some of these things that they'll willing to lend to other members, right? So
That's a darn good idea.
there you go. Because then somebody owns it and they're gonna
Okay.
make sure they get it back.
So Kristen, can you note that? Can you note that, please, Kristen? And we'll talk about it at the next board meeting, okay? Because that's, to me, is a better idea.
Yeah, I made note of it.
Sorry, Kristen? Kristen?
I said, yeah, I made note of it. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. So, let's go on to the next thing. Okay, so cost for DC fast charging. So what I did is I actually got, there was a Facebook posting from someone who went in very detailed calculations of how much does it cost to provision a charger for DCFC, okay? You may have heard of demand charges and things of that nature. Well, he covers all of that, okay? And the example is from Calgary though, so I'm not sure how it would translate to here, but it would be similar numbers. It wouldn't be the same numbers for sure, but it'd be similar numbers. So if you look at the cost of DCFC, I've talked to some people and it's typically above $100,000 per unit. I've seen costs of $200,000 and more per unit. Okay, you think if you're in an isolated location and you have to bring power to that location and then put transformers and all this stuff, someone pays for that, right? So it could cost a lot to deploy these things. I know that Tesla claims that they do it for cheaper. They probably do. I'm sure they do, but it's still a lot of money anyways. Okay. If you look at the electricity cost, so this is what NMAX in Calgary would charge you for electricity if you had a DCFC. Okay. So there's a service fee, 25 bucks a day, 26 bucks a day. Okay. There's also demand fees, and there's different types of demand fees. Okay, and I'll skip some of the details, but there's really three here: facilities charge, non-ratchetable demand charge, and demand charge. Facilities charge and demand charge, those could change. The rate could change depending on how much electricity you use. Okay, the guy doesn't cover the details in the document they have, which there's a link here. You see here in MEX in Calgary. The document doesn't cover how high the charges could go. It covers what the numbers are here. Okay, so if you look at these charges, you're talking about 15 cents per day per kilowatt hour, or kilowatt, sorry, not kilowatt hour. Okay, so you'll see, well, we'll have an example after where we translate this into real dollars.
Fuck.
No, that's the capacity that you have. Yeah, and sorry. No, this would be based on the maximum you would have used within a certain period. Okay? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but it'd be 15 cents times 50 per day. Okay, and then 5 cents for the other one, non-ratcheted demand charge. 36 cents for the other one, the other demand charge. Okay? So anyways, what this means is there's a number of different rates. Okay, the $25.85 a day that I mentioned before, that's $801 a month. Okay, and what you pay for the actual electricity that you're using is it's about 13 cents a kilowatt hour here. It's 0.12 plus 0.009, which is about 13 cents. Okay. So if we take an example, the example he has is exactly this one, but I'll show you other examples that are more illustrative of what you might expect in the real world. So if you have a 200 kilowatt charger, okay, we have 350 kilowatt chargers that are becoming fairly constant or fairly common, and you use it for 30 minutes to charge an EV, and you add 40 kilowatt hour. So you're charging a Lightning or something of the sort to add 100 kilowatt, right? So bottom line though, 30 minutes, that's important because the charger is occupied for 30 minutes, okay? And 100 kilowatt hour, that's important because you pay for that, right? And a 200 is also important because that's a maximum that you could get out of the local grid infrastructure, okay? Because, even if you don't ever use a 200 kilowatt, if you have the capability of using 200 kilowatt, they have to have equipment back, in the rest of the grid that supports that because you might use it. Okay. Exactly. So lots and lots of money, right? So, okay, let me just see if I got this. Okay, so if you look at the demand charges here in this case, just for 200 kilowatts, it'd be $3,472 for a 31-day month. Okay, you haven't charged a single car yet. Okay. Okay, so if you look at the cost of electricity itself, 100 kilowatt hour, it's only $13. Okay, so the total though for one charging event, if you had 30 minutes at 200 kilowatt once in the month, it would cost the provider once in a month, just once, it would cost them $4,286. That's what the electrical bill would look like. Okay, so you can see that that's gouging. Sorry?
Usage is important.
Well, usage is important, but let's look at usage in a bit more detail here. So I've got a bunch of different examples here, and they're essentially the same scenario. 200 kilowatt, assuming single charger, assuming 30 minutes for a session, and I've got the number of charging sessions per month about halfway down. So the case we just saw is 1, right? So I did 31. So to cover the whole month, and then 62 and other numbers. If you look at the load rate above that, so if you look at the first case, it's 0.07% of the time you're using the charger. Okay, very low utilization. But if you ramp it up, say 10%, which 10%, yeah, I think that could be reasonable once we have lots of EVs on the road. Yes, over 24 hours, absolutely, absolutely. It's important to keep that in mind. But if you look at all the costs here, the first scenario, it costs them $56 per kilowatt hour to give you that power. Okay, they're charging you 50 cents. You're getting a heck of a deal, right? But if you actually, I'll just bring the lid down here because we can't see it in the room here. But if you look at the other examples, the one at the end is really an extreme. 744, I believe, well, it's 50% of the time you're using the, so this would be one charging session every hour, right? Which is pretty unlikely, right? So the total cost here, and this is assuming, so I did a calculation assuming 10% rate of return, $100,000 for the charger over 10 years, and it gives you 20 cents a kilowatt hour, okay? Something more realistic like the 10%, 51 cents. So if you're paying 50 cents right now, there's no profit, okay? Okay, so the point is there's a lot of costs involved here, but there's things that could be done, okay? So if you look at, it's still cheaper than gas. Now, if you look at, if you're doing one charger, that's one scenario, but it's not a great scenario. Where it becomes more interesting is if you have many chargers. So Tesla, they have some locations with 20 chargers that are 350 kilowatt, okay? That's a total of 7 megawatt of power that they could potentially pull, okay? So what Tesla does though is they don't provision 7 megawatt. They provision something less, and then they control it so that the power is shared between the different chargers. If you think about it, and this I say this is, you know, a number I picked out of the air, 2,500 kilowatt. It probably, I'd be surprised if it would ever go anywhere near 2,500 for a bunch of reasons. One of them is a curve ramp. If the battery's cold, if you're getting to a higher level of charge, it charges slower, right? There aren't very many cars that'll do 250 kilowatt today. Okay, and majority of the time, of course, there's a lot of stalls that aren't being used. Okay, so if you think about the calculations before, and you have 20 of these and 2,500 kilowatt, the numbers get a lot better. Okay, they get better, but it's still a lot of money. Okay. It would be one. Yeah. Would be one. Yeah. So there's a bunch of things that become much more interesting. And if you know something about curing theory and all that, when you have 30, you could get a very high utilization rate and never run out of stalls, right? Okay, so you could really put a lot of people through, okay? The other thing you could do, of course, actually here, you know, provisioning less than 7 megawatt will reduce the capital investment by quite a bit. This stuff is really expensive, right? The other thing you could do is have variable rates. And there's a lot of providers, Tesla in particular, I know there's others that have rates that are higher during peak periods. What does that do? It spreads demand throughout the 24 hours, right? Which means you get more utilization of the infrastructure. So you have more charging stations to recoup your cash, right? Okay. So any questions on that? I think that's.
Any of the providers starting to put batteries into the equation, like on-site batteries?
Like in Tesla, I think
There-
Tesla's done that in the States.
At least to shave the peak rates, I experience.
So I've heard of some cases where they've done that, Tesla in particular, but actually there's a place along, I think it's in Wawa, or so, along on North Bay. It's a really crappy station though, that's not very reliable. There's a charger there. I can't remember the name of the provider. It's some small company from Toronto. They have a battery there. Okay. But but you're right, putting a battery in there allows you to provide more power without having to have all the infrastructure to, right?
Yeah, you can
Huh.
you can either peak the power or you can shave the the
Yeah.
usage at
Yeah.
when the rates go up due to, you know,
Yeah, yeah, there's a bunch of things you could do, but it makes a lot of sense. And actually, there are companies that, so eCamion, which is a weird name because in French, camion is truck, right? But anyways, eCamion in Toronto, they've got systems, and I saw those a number of years ago where they have batteries, and the purpose is if you don't have enough power to the building, you trickle charge the battery, and then you charge with a DC fast charger, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of people working on that type of stuff because it makes a lot of sense. If you're in the middle of nowhere,
Well, right, you said that there's the rate based on the peak usage. So if you keep your peak down due to battery
yes,
and just trickle charge the battery.
Yes.
That's because your usage is like 10% or less or whatever.
it's not just that. You don't have to necessarily add capacity to the building
Yes.
to be able to
Right.
do it, right? So there's a bunch of places where you can save money by doing that. So it makes a lot of sense. There's actually some people working on solutions like that for MURBs, where you'd put a battery in the basement somewhere and use that to charge vehicles or to do peak shaving. Okay.
So a Tesla has a portable supercharger stations?
Yeah.
With
With batteries.
or whatever you call them. So for disaster areas,
Yes.
they can wheel in this trailer
Yeah.
with batteries and you can supercharge.
Oh,
Now there's a limit to that, right? Because I mean, there's only so much energy you could put in a battery. But
Sure.
yeah, they do. I
Yeah.
think they have 3 of those in the U.S.
Yeah.
that they could bring around. So, and they use them for the hurricanes.
Yes. Right.
So
The only run is all those systems were kind of batteries where, you know, if you got there, they might not have as much charge. That's what I understood with the on the run system, which is, I guess, Journey or.
they're doing all sorts of stuff. Some of them, what they're doing is if you have a 350 kilowatt charger, but you don't have that capacity to run the 350, they'll have a battery that'll make it up. So you're getting maybe 150 from the grid, and the other 200 you get from the battery, right? So there's people are being very creative and finding all sorts of ways to leverage these to save infrastructure costs because these transformers and all the other stuff very expensive, right? Any other questions,
I don't know
comments?
if you saw, Raymond, the
Yeah.
out of spec motoring they have a supercharger at their location, and they did a video. That's exactly where they had it. They could only get permits for essentially what we would put in a normal house, a traditional sort of level 2 charger. So
Yeah.
they have their entire system works off of the battery to be a level 3 charger, and it's trickle charged at level 2. And he has all the stats and all that, and it works. It seems to work very well for them.
Yeah, and you know, if you have solar on that facility, you could stuff it in the battery, and there's all sorts of things you could do. And people are doing really interesting projects. So, any other questions? No. Okay, so
I
we'll
was
do
just gonna,
Sorry.
I was just gonna say that in a pinch, can't you offer a campsite operator if you're running a 120 volt plug? Can you offer a campsite operator to money just to use one of the powered sites
Well, so
if you're really in a
actually,
pinch?
yeah. So in the past, that was very common because we didn't have charging available, right? So Doug George, some of you know him. He had a Tesla Roadster and he went across Canada and he used campsites to charge his car because that's the only thing that was available. What I would say with it to that is if you're camping, that's great. You know, you'd want to use it to charge your vehicle. But if you're not camping, you wouldn't want to be stopping there because it's not fast enough, right?
Even overnight, it's not fast.
Yeah. Well, it gives you something.
Yeah.
If you're camping anyways, you're getting some range. But it's for travel, it's not a great solution anymore because we have much better. Okay. Cool. So now it's someone else's turn. So Lawrence, do you want to
Yep.
do the release?
So, yeah, we had some discussion about Kia and Hyundai supercharger access. Actually, I believe Hyundai is already open, or it might only be the NACS-equipped Hyundais, or it may only be US or something. But so my understanding is Hyundai was getting access before Kia at this point. And actually, for a brief period of time, Kia vehicles were able to use the superchargers, but it was a glitch, and that's been closed. But it looks like they're basically waiting for the hardware to roll out before they enable it, because they want people to use the official adapters, although they have no way of actually enforcing that. So the hardware's on the way soon. They don't have an actual timeline, and supercharger access will follow. Go to the next news item. So yeah, the issue or news we've all been hearing about. Just wanted to highlight a couple of the millions of executive orders that Trump signed. But yeah, he made a couple that are pressing a bit against EVs and wind progress. Not that it will stop it, but maybe slow down a little bit. The first thing he did was get rid of the EPA regs for emission standards that would have encouraged faster fleet electrification. And the second was halting all approvals for offshore wind. And this one's really crazy because he came up with all these things about how windmills kill whales or something. And yeah, and he's repeating the thing about windmills causing cancer, which you have to be have a really interesting mind to think that that makes any sense. But anyway, had to mention that. So we can go to the next item.
Well, there we go.
The fastest, I guess quickest accelerating Cadillac to date is now the electric Cadillac Lyriq V. If the regular Lyriq wasn't fast enough for you, now you can get one with 615 horsepower and 0 to 60 in 3.3 seconds with upgraded brakes and suspension to match.
Next.
Yep.
Okay.
This is not news. I just thought it looked cool. So please appreciate it. And there's another picture as well on the next slide. Yeah.
Is that at CES?
Is Mike there? I thought he would appreciate this.
Mike is busy with a family thing, but Henry's asking if it's at CES.
Sorry? He's asking about if it's what?
Always good.
Oh, yeah, and yeah, it's so cool to see, how everything's laid out here. Like, you can see the chargers like tucked right above the motor there. Every bit of empty space is pretty much used up. And actually, it's kind of surprising how thick the battery is, because you don't really notice it like from outside the car or inside the car. But you're just kind of sitting on that slab.
So Henry was asking if it was CES at CES.
Oh, I'm not sure.
Not sure. Okay.
Well, you can see the speaker in the rear bumper for the
Oh
sound.
Oh,
yeah.
that's a big speaker.
Yeah. Cool. There we go.
ChargePoint developed some cut resistant, I guess you can't, technically they're not uncuttable, but made some cut resistant cables to help address with some of the cable theft that's been taking place. So the cables basically include like a Kevlar type material, as well as hardened steel. So it makes it apparently very hard to cut through. But also they detect when they're being cut and make an alarm go off, which may deter the continuation of the cutting, or may deter the thief from taking all of the cables at the entire site, which would at least be a victory, because then you show up at a site and there's a one cable missing. That's a whole lot better than all of the cables are missing.
When do you think they're going to switch to what they do in Europe, where you have to bring your own cable?
CCS. So sorry, DCFC. You don't bring your own cable in Europe, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
this
so
only
that's
that only
right.
applies
That's
to
what I
level
wanted
2
to-
charging.
Yeah.
Although actually,
Chargers.
when the J3400 standard was released to formalize NACS, or the Tesla connector, It included specifications for bring your own cable for North America. So that could theoretically be deployed. I haven't seen any products using that yet, but we could start to see public chargers with the ability to kind of plug your own cable into it in North America. But it may not, it just might not catch on. We don't really know.
But I think that's only for AC though. Pretty sure it's
Yes,
only AC
yes,
still.
it is only for AC. That is correct.
And of course, someone's gonna plug in a 14 gauge wire into something that's hauling way too much and start a fire, so yeah.
There's a collaboration going on between GM and Hyundai that was just a bit interesting. I'm not aware of anything like this has happened in the past, but there could be Hyundai commercial electric vehicles, and there's like one pictured on the slide here that could be making their way to North America under GM branding, and it would actually be a bidirectional deal where GM would be selling some of their electric pickup trucks, so maybe the Silverado in other markets under Hyundai branding. But this would be neat for I feel like the small van commercial market is a bit thin still. So it'd be nice to see more options for that for businesses.
Yeah, I saw the Sprinter on the weekend. It's very expensive. It's got a lot of good range though, but it's very expensive. Whoops, it's very expensive. So.
Yeah. So some good news for Tesla owners who have an LFP battery, which would be basically any of the standard range Model 3 or Model Y that was sold within the last couple of years. So, one known sort of, I guess, slight disadvantage with LFP batteries is they don't, they can't be charged at all when they're below 0 degrees Celsius. And they're a bit more poorly performing in terms of charging in really cold conditions. And so, sometimes people don't know that they should precondition their battery before going to a charger, and they show up with a ice cold battery, and then the car doesn't seem to be charging. But actually what it's doing is it needs to warm up the battery first. So they've implemented a technology that can warm up the battery using energy from the supercharger. It's actually more kind of cooler than it sounds. It's not just that the supercharger is sending power into the car and the car is powering its heater. It was already able to do that before. What it's doing is it's actually running an alternating current through the battery that's probably at a really high frequency, and it's shifting the electrons and charges around inside the battery, and that's creating heat. So it's actually not just using the car's built-in heaters, it's directly generating heat in the battery cells, and it can do it really fast, a lot faster than the built-in heater of the car. So it would kind of get you up to temp and charging it within a few minutes. So good news for really people who live in urban environments, and may need to wake up in the morning and right away go need to charge their car that is already cold. It's unclear if this will be rolled out for the non-LFP cars or if it's even possible. I couldn't really find. Oh, how long?
Sorry, I was bad. I was trying to get the other person was making noise. My bad.
Okay, no worries. Yeah. Anyway, we can look at the next item.
Yeah, and actually, this is going to help people who don't have LFP batteries, because it means the LFP people will be spending less time charging, right?
Right.
So it's going to help everybody.
It's good news.
Right?
So there was an announcement of price increases coming for Tesla vehicles on February 1st. It's kind of unclear why. Reading into this a bit, they might be partially just doing this to scare people and get them to buy the cars faster. I mean, the thing you have to remember with Tesla prices is they change them all the time. So it might go up on February 1st, come down later. Also, kind of unclear, because their message includes no real details. They may be referencing changes to rebate programs within Canada or within specific provinces. We don't really know what'll happen until February 1st actually comes and we see what the new prices are. But yeah, just be aware of that. Yeah, not much more to say about this, I guess.
It's not Elon coordinating with Trump for the February 1st deadline for the tariffs for Canada.
Well, that doesn't make any sense because the tariffs are on imports to America. So
Yes, but they
Canada
make
hasn't
anticipation
officially announced
something.
specific tariffs it would make.
Right.
So my understanding is there is a tariff of 6% on Teslas coming into Canada from the US.
But that's not new.
Yeah. No, it's not new, no. But one thing,
You're not just talking
go ahead,
GST
go ahead.
and HST.
Sorry?
You're not just talking GST, HST. you're
No,
talking
no, no,
something
no.
else, okay.
Yeah, no, there's no like new tariffs that are actually confirmed for February 1st in terms of American cars being imported into Canada. So that's, not really the reason why this increase is happening. It also coincides with the new Model Y refresh launching. So yeah, that's kind of also this news item. So this was one of the more exciting developments for Tesla recently is they released the refreshed Model Y. It has a lot of nice improvements and a couple of things that the refreshed Model 3 didn't get. One, it got a front bumper camera. It also gets a silver infused roof that rejects heat. So you like in the summer and the sun's coming down on you, there will be much less heat coming into the car. And smoother drive, quieter drive, all around pretty good improvements. But yeah, there's only selling it as the launch edition for now, which really only makes sense to buy if you want to get FSD. Because it comes packaged with FSD and it's a lot more expensive than the Model Y would normally be. If you want FSD and you want all of the upgrades, you want like a tow hitch, you want red paint and different wheels, then you'll actually save money by buying the launch edition.
Yeah, actually, I looked at that, and if you're buying a performance with the same options, it's about the same price as this here.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
There's no plaid on.
Yeah. No, there's no plaid. But yeah, and it also comes with acceleration boost.
Yeah. Cool.
But yeah, I think that was all the news.
There you go. Okay, cool. Thanks a lot, Lawrence. Let's try to wrap this up fairly fast here. Oh, it's 8:29, not so bad. Okay, so past events, there's really not much to mention here because it's been the winter, except for the Cars and Coffee. We've had one almost every week except December 28th for good reason. And we've been alternating between Plaza Orléans and the second cup on Maryville, so East End and West End. So if we look at upcoming events, again, we have our monthly meeting. We are actually looking for another venue. We'll let you know, though, if we have another venue before the next meeting. But for now, it's going to be here. Cars and Coffee, following every week again. It's still winter, so we're not on the summer schedule. We're just going to keep on going 1 week in Orleans and one in Nepean. So a few little things that are happening in the short term. So I'm going to be at a condo on Kent Street on the 29th on Wednesday to talk about charging in the condo. So if anybody else comes up and has questions about that and want to talk to someone, I'd be happy to talk to them. This one here, I can't remember the address, but it's a condo on Kent Street. So no, I don't remember the specific one. But if you want to know, I could get back to you after. Yes. So no. So we could do a presentation to owners who want to understand, or I think it's more appropriate for the board at first, anyways, to inform them so that they could bring something to the owners, right? But the idea is to do what we did with the pilot project, but a lighter version of it, and just the presentation part. Okay. I'm doing a talk with an organization in BC. They have some kind of a seminar series, and I got looped into doing a talk on EV, so that should be interesting. Then I'm going to be at the Good Companion Center on February 26th. Okay, just so this is to let you know there's other stuff happening that we don't involve most other people in too. If you look at other things that are coming up, so April is looking fairly busy. So April 11th to 13th, we have the EV show in Gatineau again this year. Same place as last year. Now, there's been a lot of a lot of concern about the fact that rebates are gone and all that. Although in Quebec, they will come back April 1st. Okay, the $4,000 comes back April 1st. Yeah. Okay, so it's paused on February 1st. Excuse me, but comes back on April 1st. Okay. Now, I've been talking to them about doing this for a while, and their site has already only been in French, and everything is all in French. And that gives some people the impression that they won't be able to talk to people at the show. They're going to have an English website. They're going to. I'm actually trying to get some talks in English also, because there's a series of talks that we do every year. I'd like to do some in English too. Other thing we're going to be doing that's different here is that we're going to be working with l'AVEC. l'AVEC, for a bunch of reasons I want to explain, they can't come in the numbers they usually come. So what we want to do is use local volunteers from l'AVEC and from EVCO to help with the show. What we're expecting to do is to get a whole bunch of dealer vehicles. Okay, so contrary to normal where we use our vehicles, we're hoping to mostly use dealer vehicles. Okay. Well, so there's a lot of people who don't want to use their own vehicle for insurance reasons and all that, right? That's part of the reason we're doing this. And now dealers actually have stock. Okay, so it's a lot easier for them to provide vehicles, right? So, anyways, you'll get more on that next month, obviously, and then we'll be looking for volunteers to help with that. Okay, so the test drives will be happening from Friday afternoon until I think it's 8 o'clock on Friday, and then the 2 weekend days are something like 10 to 5. I think it's 10 to 6 and then 10 to 5 or something of the sort. So anyways, we'll be looking for volunteers, and we will be using l'AVEC's reservation system. They have a great reservation system that's really designed for larger numbers. Ours that we used in the past, it works, but it's not super practical if we're doing large numbers of test drives, right? So they got to set up with all sorts of screens showing the next appointments and all that we don't have, right? So, but again, emphasize for volunteers, we're working to figure how to make this work here, but there's a lot of Anglophones on the Quebec side and the Ontario side, and Francophones on both, right? So you don't have to speak French to volunteer to this thing, okay? You don't have to speak English to volunteer for this thing, okay? So I haven't put it yet, but I will put it probably tomorrow. Although things are busy this week. So I don't know if you guys have heard, there might be there will be an election called tomorrow or Wednesday. Anyways, so the event after that is that's a smaller event. April 24th. That'll be a presentation, but what we want to do is have a few cars to show people after the presentation so they could look at some of the cars, but that'll be quite small. So the other one that's a big event that we've been participating in for a long time now is the North Grenville Sustainability Fair and EV Show. So what we would like to do is something very similar to last year, where we have some dealer vehicles, as many as possible, and do test drives at the event. Okay, so yeah, that's a Kempville event, right? That we've done. Yeah, we've done that. We've done this thing for, it's got to be 10 years now. So, anyways, the next event, May 3rd, don't have all the details as you can see there. The Earth Fest in Carleton Place. So the intent is to do test drives as we did last year, and have a booth, and so that should be an interesting event. So that's it for events right now. Reminder, if you're not a member, please sign up. We've changed the membership this year with different levels. So if you want to donate, or if you want to have a higher level membership, we're working to have things. That's why we were talking about the plugs or the adapters earlier. We're working to have things that would be specific to people that are in higher levels, right? So free calendars and all sorts of things of that nature. Okay. Yeah. Oh, and I just checked today. We have 111 subscribers on the EVCO channel, up from 95 last time. So reminder that we put our recordings up there. They don't always get there very fast, but they do get there eventually. What else is there? I think the rest is roundtable. Oops. Yeah, it's a roundtable. Okay, so here what I'll do is I'll stop the recording.